They'll get Curtis. Yes, they can sit.
What's that? I am happy. Hello, how are you? Good, good. Judiciary was yesterday. Yeah, yeah. See,
Maybe tell me if they get trash.
He said he wasn't getting up here.
Is he? Where is okay. Where is Steph?
Oh. Oh, Stephanie's over here. You want her in? Okay. Watch yourself. And after you.
All right, then let me change these. If you want to introduce
You have to go back up. Or I'll come back and introduce you.
I'm good. No, I kept it short and I added in the presidential debate.
All right. Can we get started? Can, huh? Me, Curtis, and then I'm going to bring you back. Okay?
What's up now?
Good evening, everyone. Yep. We're going to get started. And before we do, I just have one small announcement. If you could please refrain from eating in the sanctuary. We had some snacks for you guys earlier, but we really ask that you not bring it in the sanctuary. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mount Carmel. My name is Janae Moore, and it's my absolute honor to stand before you tonight as the First Lady of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church. I want to take a moment to acknowledge my husband, the Reverend Dr. Donald D. Moore. Thank you, Pastor, for your leadership, your vision, and for continuing a rich legacy here at Mount Carmel, a church that has never turned its back on its community. Mount Carmel has always been more than four walls and a sanctuary. This congregation has a long, proud history of civic empowerment and social action, fighting for justice, uplifting families, and standing in the gap for this community is not new to us. It is who we are, and tonight we're continuing that legacy. To our attendees and guests, we're glad to have you here for this Pennsylvania Congressional Forum in the 3rd District. Whether you came with questions, concerns, or simply a desire to be more informed, you belong in this room. This evening was created with you in mind, and particularly the Black women in our community whose voice, whose votes, and whose future deserves to be front and center in every conversation about leadership in this district. Having spent time in campaigns and government myself, I know firsthand how the decisions made in Washington reach into our everyday lives, our schools, our healthcare, our safety, and our families. And I know the most powerful tool is we have our vote. This election is too important for us to sit on the sidelines, and tonight it's about getting our questions answered and knowing who is asking for your vote. Walking out of these doors, my hope is that you're more informed, more inspired, and more ready than when you walked in. I am also deeply thrilled to be in partnership with some truly dynamic organizations tonight, and many are women organizations. Thank you to Mount Carmel's own Case Ministry, the National Council of Negro Women, the Urban League of Greater Philadelphia, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, and our awesome moderator, Shari Williams, and her 6 ABC team, who graciously agreed to stream this live. We are very appreciative to everyone who has made this possible. We're also grateful to have our 4th District Councilman here, and I'd like to call Councilman Curtis Jones to give some brief remarks.
First Lady, give her a round of applause. And Pastor did real good, didn't he? Welcome to Mount Carmel. This is a church I got baptized in way back in the day under Campbell. And this is the neighborhood that I grew up in, Edgewood Street, 300 block. You are in the 4th Ward, in the 4th District, and we are deciding who we will elect to the 3rd Congressional District. And I am proud to say you got some good choices. There's some very exciting positions that you'll hear from tonight. Sherry's going to ask all the tough questions. I'm glad I don't have to do that. But I look forward to their answers, and I hope you have your popcorn ready. Thank you.
There is one organization that I did not mention because I wanted to save them for last, but that is the Center 1968, who is largely responsible for us having this here at Mount Carmel. Born from the vision of its founder, Jasmine Sessoms, many of you may remember when she was with She Can Win, and she made it her mission to train women who were ready to run for office and build careers in government. Jasmine's been paving the way ever since, helping elect mayors, state representatives, senators, and judicial councils, and opening doors for chief of staffs and legislative aides across the city. She has invested in every woman at every level, and the results speak for themselves. I'm truly honored to work alongside Jasmine and the Center 1968 to bring this information not only to Mount Carmel Baptist Church, but to constituents throughout the 3rd Congressional District. Thank you for being here, and I'd like to call Jasmine Sessoms from Center 1968 to give remarks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Jasmine Sessoms. Like the First Lady said, I want to extend my sincere thanks. I am literally on my tippy toes. I want to extend my sincere thanks to my dear friends, Pastor Moore and the First Lady Moore. Thank you so much for opening your church and your doors to Mount Carmel to host this really important conversation. Tonight's forum title is titled Black Women Have Questions. We chose that title intentionally. Black women are the most consistent voters in this country. Election after election, we show up and we show out. We organize, we mobilize, and we help shape the direction of our communities and our democracy. Yet far too often, the policies that are debated, the priorities that are elevated, and the solutions that are proposed do not fully reflect the voices and experience of Black women. Tonight is about to change that. It is truly an honor for me to introduce our moderator so that we can get started, Shari Williams. Shari is the co-anchor of Action News at 5 and Action News at 10. She joined the Action News team in March 2014 as the anchor of the 5 o'clock p.m. newscast and reporter of Action News 11. For more than a decade, Shari has immersed herself into the Philadelphia community, uniquely telling stories that matter to residents in the Delaware Valley. Shari has covered presidential debates and moderated mayoral races and U.S. Senate candidate debates. So tonight, without further ado, I give you Shari Williams.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Jasmine, to the First Lady of this house, Janae Moore, and of course to the pastor as well, Dr. Donald Moore. Thank you so much for hosting us and allowing us to have an opportunity to prepare to have our voices heard in a very, of course, important election. And we will get right to things on this evening. I am Shari Williams, news anchor with 6ABC. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to help us guide this conversation tonight. We do have some ground rules and the way we will go throughout this, but this is more of a congressional interview. We will be trying to see how can we hear contrast of what is being presented so that you can leave here more informed. And so yes, welcome to the Black Women Have Questions Congressional Forum. We are going to start with every candidate who is represented here tonight being given 30 seconds to just introduce themselves to you, and then from there we will begin the questioning. And we will start on the end for introductions. Sharif Street, you have 30 seconds, sir, to introduce yourself to the crowd.
I'm Senator Sharif Street. I'm a father of 5, husband to April, grandfather of 6. I am a lawyer by trade, a member of the Senate. I care about making sure our communities are safe, making sure that our children have health care, and making sure that we stand up to Donald Trump. And making sure that every voice in our community is heard.
Thank you, sir. Dave Oxman.
Good evening. My name is Dave Oxman, and I am really thrilled to be here. It is such an honor to be here with you tonight. I am a physician. I work as an intensive care doctor at Jefferson. I have spent my life not only at the bedside, but being an activist for issues including gun violence, combating the opioid epidemic, and fighting for a fix to our broken healthcare system. And I'm thrilled to be here tonight with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Morgan Cephas.
Thank you, Sherry. So I am State Representative Morgan Cephas. Good evening, West Philadelphia and Mount Carmel. First and foremost, I have been a state representative, and I've been representing my district, West Philadelphia, for the past 10 years. And I, again, want to thank Mount Carmel with Pastor Donald Moore, First Lady Janae Moore, for hosting tonight's conversation, specifically also the Black women-led organizations that that are represented here tonight. Because we know when we fail as a country, when we fail our democracy, Black women specifically bear the brunt of those pressures. And I am running for Congress to ensure that I get your vote, but ensure that we move our district forward for prosperity for everyone.
Morgan, thank you. Chris Rabb.
Good evening. I'm State Representative Chris Rabb. I represent 70,000 souls in Northwest Philadelphia across 4 neighborhoods for 5 terms in a majority Black mixed income neighborhood. And I have been in office and have been propelled in this space and service largely because of the extraordinary turnout of Black women in my district. And I am running on a legacy where I have a rich inheritance of Black women and men who were civil rights activists, abolitionists, and troublemakers.
Thank you, sir. Ayla Stanford.
Hello, Philadelphia. I represent Philadelphia, not the postcard, the real one, the one that raised me, the one I work for every single day. I'm not here to talk about bills. I'm here because leadership isn't a title. It's what you do when nobody's watching, when the resources are thin, when the need is great. I've been doing this work. You have felt it, and I'm just getting started. Dr. Ayla Stanford, founder, Black Doctors Consortium.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for all of those introductions. Let me be clear here in the House, if you have a device, please silence it or turn it off. We would like to have no interruptions as we go through this evening so that we can keep a swift and smooth program. Please, if you have a device, please silence it or turn it off. For the questions tonight, you will have 1 minute to answer. I will allow a 30-second rebuttal, if one is appropriate or necessary, and you will know when that is. Question 1, please. This district, of course, is overwhelmingly Democratic. In fact, it is the most Democratic-leaning district in the entire country. And that means the winner of the Democratic primary will very likely become the next member of Congress. That means this race is less about party differences and more about which vision of leadership and policy direction you, the voters, trust most. How will your leadership style ensure that voices of marginalized communities, particularly Black women and working class families, are heard and prioritized in national policy decisions? How is your leadership better suited for the job than anyone else on this stage? Morgan Cephas.
Thank you for the question. So in my leadership while in Harrisburg, I not only serve my constituents in West Philadelphia, but I'm also the Philadelphia delegation chair, and I've been it with the support of 25 members coming from the delegation. And one of the things I believe immediately, in 2016 when I was first elected, I actually had to take on the Democratic Party in order to gain my seat. I was not given a seat. And I firmly believe if we want to tackle the challenges here in the city of Philadelphia in the 3rd Congressional District and actually prioritize our issues, not only do we have to take on Republicans and beat them, of which I was able to do, and give Joanna McClinton the gavel, the first Black woman here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but also I ensured that Democrats were held to a standard to ensure that we are currently delivering for the city of Philadelphia. And that is the same work I would take to Washington, D.C. Because again, it is both the failed policies of Republicans and the status quo of Democrats not delivering for our city is the reason why we are here today. And we have to ensure that we are sending Democrats that are going to be able to get to work, flip the chamber, and actually deliver for us in real time. And I've done that over the past 10 years of my career.
Thank you, Morgan. Dave Oxman, same question, sir.
Thank you.
You understand the question? You're good.
I think so.
Thank you.
Yes. I mean, I just want to take it out of the politics realm for a second and just talk about my values, because I think so much about choosing a person to represent you in Congress is about knowing the values of the person who's representing you. So let me lean into my medical background. So I'm an intensive care doctor, and I have never saved a single person by myself. I did it with team. I did it with people who I relied on because they sometimes know more stuff than I do. And I know that in order to lead a team, every person in that team needs to feel heard and needs to feel respected. Because when you build that kind of culture, when you do have disagreements, you can lean into that culture and bring people along with you. So when I think about leading, I think about listening first. That's the kind of person I am as a physician, and that's the kind of person I'll be as a representative.
Thank you, sir. Senator Sharif Street. How is your leadership better suited for the job than anyone else on this stage? How will you ensure marginalized voices are heard on the national stage?
Thank you. Look, I think the best indicator of future performance is past performance. On our community, when people are dying from gun violence, and we lost a loved one on a mass shooting on 60th Street, I didn't just talk about it, delivered $300 million a year in violence prevention money, and we went from an all-time high to an all-time low in gun violence prevention. Did that in a Republican-led Senate chamber because we understood we needed to get things done. When we talk about health care, and the people who are least likely to have opportunities to health care and are the last to get it are in our community, I introduced legislation, created the Pennsylvania Health Care Exchange. 500,000 additional people have health care because of it. When you talk about job creation and our folks not having opportunities to get into the high-paid jobs, particularly those who didn't go to college, we put money, millions of dollars into PTTI. They have a campus in North Philadelphia. They are opening one in West Philadelphia. 600 to 700 people a year are getting it. The difference is I've actually got things done as a state senator, and I will get them done as a congressman.
Thank you, sir. Ayla Stanford, same question. How is your leadership better suited for the job than anyone else on this stage? How will you represent marginalized communities like Black women, working class families on the national stage?
On June 6, 2020, I stood in this sanctuary. I took care of many of you, and I filled a gap where many of our leaders with titles were responsible for that. I'm a private citizen. I was a private citizen at that time. And when people reached out and said, we need help, we're being turned away from hospitals, I did everything I could. I put my talent, my money, my coalition, and took care of the entire city of Philadelphia. And when you start with the least, the lost, those that need a safety net, you then take care of everyone. And at that time, it was Black people, Black families, Black mothers, Black sisters. And I put everything into it. It continues beyond COVID. We now have a health center at 21st and Lehigh, another at 7979 State Road. I have never stopped. I've been doing it. And it's what you do when the seas are rough, not when it's calm. That's when you determine a leader.
Thank you, Ayla Stanford. Chris Rabb, please wrap us up on this question.
Thank you. I have a question for all of you. What percentage of Black women showed up for Kamala Harris? 92%. Y'all delivered for the Democratic Party, but did the Democratic Party deliver for you? I am not a Black woman, but I'm a brother who is tired of being taken for granted. And it's not just Black women, it's young people too who feel invisible. Democratic Party has not listened to its base. They have disrespected us. And I'm the only one up here who has fought against that type of mentality in the Democratic machine and beaten them. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I didn't do it for status, I did it for service, because that is how I was raised, and I was putting out legislation before it was popular to be against ICE. I was talking about reparations and putting stuff out before it became popular. I was doing these things because we have to do the right thing in the moment and not just wait until the political winds serve us. And that is the type of leader I will be in Congress.
Thank you, Chris Rabb. Let's move to our second question now. And this one, as we have noted, these questions have come from Black women and are top of mind for Black women. Survival, of course, a big part of that. Let's talk maternal and reproductive health. The United States continues to face a maternal health crisis with disproportionately high mortality rates among Black women. According to the CDC, Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than their counterparts. What federal actions, opportunities, would move the needle to improving maternal health outcomes, protecting reproductive health care, access to health care, and addressing racial bias in the healthcare system? Dave Oxman, you have 1 minute.
So as an intensive care doctor, I have taken care of women who are pregnant in crisis, and I see these shocking, monstrous disparities in the way that different Philadelphians are treated, and I see the way that health outcomes are related not to the biology of your disease, but what zip code you happen to live in or what the color of your skin is. So it's not just maternal health. I can tell you with a disease like asthma right now, the biggest factor in how your asthma is going to be controlled is not the biology of your asthma, but where you live, what kind of environmental exposures you have, and what kind of access to care you have. And right now there are too many disparities, and we cannot continue to have a healthcare system that makes it so difficult for so many people to access it.
Thank you, sir.
I'll leave it there and hopefully come back to healthcare a bit later.
Senator Sharif Street, the question is, what federal actions, opportunities would help move the needle to improve maternal health outcomes for Black women?
Well, thank you. Well, first I want to say sometimes it's access to information and access to resources. We put on a community baby shower each year where we not only give away bassinets and diapers and those things, but we also have hundreds of healthcare providers at Temple University making sure that people get basic information. Over 1,000 expectant moms come in to make sure that they have access to the information, to make sure they have access to the resources that are needed. So often in our community, people don't have access to effective resources. And I think as a member of Congress, I will continue to make sure folks have access to resources. Look, and I'm gonna do something that I didn't plan to do, but I do want to say on this issue. On the issue of maternal health, it's also about leading and working with the people who have been leading in this issue. As a state legislator, I was proud to support the legislation championed by Representative Cephas in the House on the mommy bus legislation. That kind of legislation and being able to work with people who are doing the right thing is part of how we will get things done. And I've gotten it done as a legislator, and I'll get it done as a member of Congress.
Thank you, Sharif Street. Ayla Stanford.
As a mom who was pregnant and treated unfairly, I know all too well what happens. With the grassroots work I did during COVID, I was appointed by President Biden to be the regional director of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, covering 5 states in the District of Columbia. During that time, the postpartum care coverage was extended from 30 to 60 days to a year, and I was responsible and worked closely with Vice President Harris and Ambassador Susan Rice for it to be passed in the 5 states of Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, DC, and Pennsylvania. And on April 2022, I stood on the steps with Rep. Curry and the Lieutenant Governor's wife, and we presented that legislation from the federal level that was then able to be carried out at the state level. And I'm proud to say that in my 5 states and the district, it was adopted early, and that brought more resources to reduce mortality and morbidity. And I just Philadelphia, Black women represent 43% of the births, but 72% of the deaths. So there is work to do at the legislative level, and I will fight for that. I apologize.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford. Yes, it is extremely disproportionate, and this is why work needs to be done on the federal level. Chris Rabb, what would you do? Policies, strategic moves, if you become the congressman of this district?
Well, this is about health care and access to health care, but it's also about the stressors that moms deal with, particularly Black mothers deal with, that are systemic, that we have to address. We can't just play around the edges. Yes, information is important, but it's not nearly enough. We have to address this on a structural level. So whether it's universal health care or housing or all the things that make these choices in families harder and are disproportionately impacting Black women, we need to invest in that. And this is personal because I decided to have a vasectomy after I had 2 beautiful kids because I was afraid of how my wife at the time was going to be treated as a Black woman. And it didn't matter that she had fancy degrees. It didn't matter what was in her heart because we know this medical system hurts Black women more than anyone. And it impacts all of us. How we treat Black women is how we treat society.
Thank you, sir. Morgan Cephas.
Thank you for the question, because Black women are 3 times more likely to die from childbirth than their white female counterparts. And I know we talk about statistics, we talk about legislation, but I always like to uplift 3 stories. One, Serena Williams, who has the best health care, probably will be in the best shape than I will ever be in life, but her doctors did not treat her well enough, and she almost lost her life. So we not only have to hold hospitals, insurance companies, but we also have to hold doctors accountable to the racism that exists within our healthcare structure. They are all 3 a part of that system. But I also like to raise the issue of LaShawna Gilmore, who I was at the same age, 34 years old, who passed away in a hospital bed. So this is real lives, real impacts when we don't get it right. So in Harrisburg, work, we were able to extend Medicaid coverage up to a year of postpartum, but that only lasts for 5 years, which is why we need on the federal level full extension. We also were able to get Medicaid to cover doula care and midwives, which is also something that we have to do on the federal level. And last but not least, because this is also an economic issue, we have to ensure that we're passing universal basic income, which I am the only candidate up here that has not only created a program, invested in a program, and we saw the lives of 250 moms here in the city of Philadelphia thrive as a direct result of that work. And that
Morgan,
is what
thank
we
you.
must do in level.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan Cephas. Well, let's stick to healthcare. Let's take another question in this arena because we know how important it is to the constituents and those who are voting, especially in these times. Sharif Street, how will you protect Medicaid programs and services that constituents of the 3rd Congressional District with disabilities and their families rely on for healthcare and other critical services?
Well, we need to restore the Medicaid cuts, the $800 billion of Medicaid cuts that Donald Trump cut out of Medicaid in order to give tax cuts to his billionaire friends. I will point out that we need to restore the Obamacare tax credits. I'm proud to have created the Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange and brought healthcare to an additional 500,000 Pennsylvanians and brought down the cost for everyone else. I will tell you, I will fight for a budget that restores the Medicaid cuts. I'll fight for a budget that restores the Obamacare tax credits. And not only that, when the care that Medicaid patients receive, Medicaid only pays 62 cents on the dollar, which means that if you have a hospital in a community like this, where many of the people are on Medicaid, everyone that walks in there receives a lower quality of care because the hospital is systemically underfunded by Medicaid. And so I will fight to make sure Medicaid pays 100 cents on the dollar so that it pays the full cost so that people can get the quality of care that they deserve. I think that's incumbent upon the federal government to make sure that we not only deliver care, but we deliver high quality care to people regardless of their income level.
Mr. Street, thank you. Ayla Stanford, how will you protect the Medicaid programs?
So, and you also talked about disabilities, right? Yes. Okay. So one, the IDEA Full Funding Act, which is one that's currently being considered, is specifically for individuals with disabilities in Education Act, or IDEA. So it guarantees students with disabilities to have the support. The other is leading by example. The healthcare center that I built is universal healthcare. If you have health insurance, we see you. If you have no insurance, we see you. There is no tiered care. The other is calling people out with the monopolies that are created. It was just in the Inquirer today that Aetna was sued for millions of dollars for Medicare fraud. And you need to be able to call that out when Oak Street Health and CVS are all making money off of you. And then finally, we need more doctors in Congress who understand the business and the healthcare to pass appropriate legislation.
Thank you. Chris Rabb.
I'm a proud son and grandson of black doctors who served black folk for decades. But I gotta say, Medicaid is not nearly enough. So should we restore? Of course, 100% instead of 62%. Sure, absolutely, but Medicaid is not enough. That was the normal before Trump and for the awfulness in the pandemic. Normal has never suited black folk. Normal is what we got when other folks benefited at our expense. We need Medicare for all. We need universal health care. That's what we need, because every time folks legislate and they decide who they got to cut out to get the deal, black women and black men are the first to get cut. And look, I don't take money from corporate PACs, so follow the money. You're going to see what we do when the people go to Congress who are committed to the many and not to the moneyed.
Thank you, sir. Morgan Cephas.
Until we get Medicare for all and universal health care, black women simply can't wait on empty promises and things that you can't deliver. I mean, you can always talk about big ideas, but the question is, in this moment as Democrats, can you deliver on those ideas. And when it comes to healthcare, again, I've delivered on Black maternal mortality and Black maternal health. Specifically here in the city of Philadelphia, if you didn't know, our rates are actually going down because of being a Democrat that delivers. So we need to send somebody to Congress that's actually going to deliver on their promise, not just give you blank, empty commercials. And again, what we must do is, again, of course, extend those tax care credits, but we got to make it permanent because, again, there is no new normal. We need to break a system that has not been working for us and actually deliver the system that we need. But we also have to make sure we hold hospitals and doctors accountable because they too are accountable for the bad outcomes that we are seeing in our community. And it's not just systematic racism, but it's the fact that they don't want to give the care that we need for our community. We also have to increase those Medicaid reimbursements so, again, we can keep our hospitals open. That's what we need to do in Congress.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cephas. Mr. Oxman, please round us out on this question.
Yeah, a lot of true things were said here, and I agree with a lot of them. Let me tell you, I've worked inside this healthcare system for the last 25 years, and it is broken. I mean, it's broken. And yeah, sure, we need to protect Medicaid, but you know, right now, the private health insurance industry makes about $70 billion a year in profit. Average American pays about $20,000 a year for their insurance, and they still, because of copays and annual caps, are one illness away from needing a GoFundMe page. We are in like an abusive relationship with our health care, right? All our friends know we gotta leave, but we're too afraid because somewhere out there something might be worse. I'm telling you, we do not have to have health care like this. I agree, protecting Medicaid until we get something else, count me in. But Democrats need to lead on this issue. And you know what? It's not just a matter of it being the right thing. If Democrats have the courage to lead on this, it is a political winner. I am sure of that.
Thank you, Dave Oxman. We want to move now to economic justice, wage equity, and entrepreneurship. Black women face both a racial wealth gap and a gender pay gap, earning roughly 67 cents for every dollar that is paid to a white man. What policies would you support to address economic barriers facing Black women and girls, including entrepreneurship resources, student debt relief, affordable childcare, and wage equity enforcement? Ayla Stanford.
I'm going to start first. As someone who went to Health Center number 9, was on welfare, for us, it was a bridge and not a crutch. And it can benefit you with opportunity. I'm a small business owner, the only one who went from Section 8 to taking care of this city to the White House. We are capable of so much. Congressman Shaka Fattah, so education is one, is how I was able to pay for college. The small business loans that exist need to be available for all with restrictions that are culturally appropriate for the women that are applying for these loans. And finally, regarding the wage, that is, we hope that with the governor and the state reps and the state senators that we can increase the minimum wage. And I can tell you at my health center, everyone makes $25 an hour or more, and I will continue to fight for that as your congresswoman.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford. Chris Rabb.
It's just so funny you mentioned this. I wrote a book on this in 2010 called Invisible Capital, where I talked about how Black women were the most likely folks to start a business in this country, but the least successful because of barriers that prevented them to do so. So any successes we see are in spite of systems that are put in place. We need to make sure that we have healthy investments in local businesses so that we can actually have an expansive workforce, that we can build community wealth and not just profit maximization by these billionaire class folks who support businesses that extract our labor and our talent and not give to our communities. I also have introduced the most serious minimum wage bill in the entire country that not just increases it to the living wage and expands it to incarcerated workers who currently get paid 19 cents an hour, but it also removes the tipped minimum wage, which is $2.83 in this state, and is disproportionately given to black women who are in the service and hospitality fields. And that is something that has to be abolished. That's my bill, and I would take that to Congress should I be elected.
Thank you. Chris Rapp, thank you, sir. Morgan Cephas.
So we know in this moment that black women are the fastest growing entrepreneurs in this country. But as was mentioned on this panel, there are significant barriers to that. And black women have been sometimes forced to become entrepreneurs because when you look at 300,000 women that didn't quit their job, but were pushed out of this economy, we have to do better as we go down to Washington, D.C. and prioritize a series of things. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, we need to prioritize access to capital, contracts, and customers. So I believe that Congress can help us create a municipal bank here in the city of Philadelphia so our priorities, our demographic that black women make up a significant portion of in this city can be reflected in our investments. I also, as a congressperson, as a convener in this city, when you have places like the University of Penn, Temple, we are eds, meds, and beds city. When they come into your office and demand resources, I want you to open your books of contracts to see who you are investing in, and it better be black women. And that is what I would do as your congressperson.
Thank you, Morgan Cephas. Mr. Oxman.
I agree with many of the things said. I think access to capital is critical. It is harder for black women to get access to capital. It's harder for black women starting businesses to get government contracts. I think it's also important to, build around, it's not just the business, but how government fails to support women, black women particularly, and all women in general, without daycare, without access to affordable daycare, without access to family leave. How can you go start a business if you know that putting your child in daycare is going to cost you $2,000 a month, or you don't have access to family leave? So in addition to doing things to directly empower black women entrepreneurially, I think it's also critical that the federal government works to create structures around women that can enables them to go out and create businesses and pursue everything else they want to pursue.
Thank you, Mr. Oxman. Sharif Street, black women facing both that racial wealth gap because of gender and race, earning that 67 cents compared to a white man. What are you prepared to do if elected to Congress to bridge this gap?
Look, I think there are some very specific things we can and should do. First, we need to enforce the Community Reinvestment Act. A lot of times black women can't succeed because when they walk into a bank, they're not given appropriate access to capital, and the Community Reinvestment Act is supposed to enforce that, supposed to deal with that. We need to restore the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department because there's so much discrimination. That's the part of the federal government that's supposed to fight and stamp out all of the systemic racism and sexism that exists in our economic systems. We need to restore the Department of Housing and Urban Development's division that addresses redlining in our communities, because redlining not only addresses whether you can get a mortgage and whether you can own the sticks and bricks that your business is located in, but it also addresses the rates at which you pay for that mortgage and whether you can get insurance on that property. We need to restore the provisions of the Department of Education. The Department of Education is tasked to make sure there's not discrimination in education, and we need to do that. And finally, on top of all of it, we need to be prepared to sue Donald Trump's administration if he will not do the following, as I have done over a dozen times and will be prepared to do as a member of Congress.
Thank you, sir. Let's move to housing and environmental justice. Philadelphia faces a housing crisis. Rising rents, aging house stock, evictions in vulnerable neighborhoods. Families in Philadelphia, many of them spend over 30% of their income on housing. What federal actions will you take to make housing in Philadelphia more affordable without causing displacement? Chris Rabb.
We need to have guaranteed housing. And I understand that a lot of these things that I say seem radical. That don't mean they're not true. And in the richest country in world history, we shouldn't be accepting anything less than guaranteed housing and making sure that the housing is green and that we hire locally and we support unions. But we also have to make sure that the reasons our housing is crumbling in our infrastructure is because of climate change, and that environmental racism impacts black folk the most, particularly in Philadelphia. But it may sound straightforward and easy for you to accept who's for environmental racism. But if you take money from groups whose whole futures are based on fossil fuel production, if that's where your money's coming from, if that's where your political influence is coming from, then when you get to Congress, you're compromised. So we need to have environmental justice in the most meaningful ways, and I have a 10-year legislative track record of doing that.
Thank you, sir. Morgan Cephas, what would you do federally to help make sure that Philadelphia can get through its housing crisis?
I would match what the city of Philadelphia and the state has done when it comes to putting up dollars for housing. So our history-making mayor has put up over $850 million worth of an investment to build affordable housing and to preserve affordable housing. Our then governor committed to over $1 billion. So we need to match that on the federal level. When I think of infrastructure, we constantly talk about rural America when it comes to roads and bridges. But infrastructure for us looks like building affordable housing. That means creating more jobs. It looks like investing in our old housing stock. We are in West Philadelphia, where a lot of our neighborhoods were built before the 1940s. So we need that new roof. We need that new foundation. So we have to ensure that there are dollars that do just that. We also have to pay attention to our renter community. 47% of Philadelphia are renters. And just how mortgages and homeowners are able to take credits against their home ownership, we need to do the same thing for renters.
Okay, an idea. Dave Oxman, sir, how would you be addressing housing and the challenges for the district, 3rd Congressional District?
Right. The housing crisis did not come up overnight. It has been decades in the making. And so you wouldn't know it from the way the politicians talk about it. And so many of the politicians, including politicians on our side of the aisle, have been ignoring the magnitude of the problem. We need to do a lot of things. We need to obviously support low-income housing, make it easier to rent, get private equity out of the rental market, but we also need to face some realities about things we have done, which is, because of regulation, it is so expensive to build public housing, right? To build low-income housing has become so expensive that it stops us from addressing the problem. We need to recognize that we have made too many deals with developers and giving them sweetheart deals in a way that, and let them off the hook for building low-income housing that it should have, because they might be donating to a political campaign here or there. So there's so much work to be done.
Thank you. Dave Oxman. Sharif Street.
Thank you. Access to housing. There are a bunch of very specific things we can do. The federal government controls the amount of affordable housing tax credits we have, low-income housing tax credits. People hear about 9% credits, which are the most favorable ones. Hard to get because they're not enough. We need to expand them. We need to deliver more money for regular built affordable housing managed and owned by the Philadelphia Housing Authority. We need to expand the resources into the Department of Housing and Urban Development to do that. We need to get private equity out of competing in the residential housing markets. Elizabeth Warren has a bill to do that. I will support similar legislation in the House. We need to expand the Housing Choice Voucher Program to allow renters to have access to additional housing, subsidized housing market. We need to, again, as I mentioned before, make sure that we enforce the Community Reinvestment Act, because people who are buying can't buy houses because they can't get mortgages. We need to make sure people can have access to mortgages, and there's lots of discrimination, especially against Black women. And we need to create a program like the Whole Home Repair Program, which I was a co-sponsor of creating at the state level, to make sure people in their houses have money to fix them up and stay there.
Thank you, Sharif Street. Ayla Stanford, if you would round us out on this question.
Sure. So there are two bills currently on the floor for the federal level. One is co-sponsored by Congressman Dwight Evans, who endorsed me for Congress, named the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. And what that does is it protects renters. It reduces the rental amount so that they can stay in their residences. And the second is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, which will allow you to rehab and renovate and stay in your homes. And so we have an opportunity to pass that. When we talk about environmental air quality, you may know that Philadelphia ranks number 4 in terms of the worst air quality in the United States. So I applaud Mayor Parker and what she is doing to measure that and hold those accountable that are building. And finally, these data centers right now, they are coming to Philadelphia with the artificial intelligence. We need water that's siphoned off. It adds coolant like to your car, and all that is going into our river. We need to hold those folks accountable when they buy land and continue to put toxins into our communities. And I will fight for that legislation.
Thank you. Do you feel like you're being informed? Are you getting some of your questions answered? Okay, great. I do want to applaud all 5 of the candidates who are here. You are being very accessible and taking the questions and also answering them. Thank you for that. We are now going to take a brief 15-minute break, and then we will continue our Black Women Have Questions Congressional Forum. I bring back to you now the First Lady, Janae Moore.
We do need to take a quick break just to handle some technical things, so we ask you to be patient. I did want to make note, if you received a note card when you came into the sanctuary and you had a question that you wanted to submit, I have ladies around the sanctuary that will come around to collect your questions. So if you do have a question that you would like to submit, we will have our lady hosts coming around to collect them from you. While we are during our break, we do have a brief presentation. If you do have to run to the restroom or the facilities, we ask that you come back. I'd like to call Tia Watson from the Urban League to the stand. Tia is going to give us some insightful information on the roles and responsibilities of a congressperson. A lot of times we go into the voting booth and vote for elected officials, but we aren't fully educated and equipped with the things that they do on our behalf when they go to Washington and when they're around the congressional district. So I'd like to introduce Ms. Watson. Thank you.
All right, guys. If you are leaving the building or the room, I just ask that you do that quietly, please, so that I can give you some information really quickly. All right, so we have about 10 minutes. So before we get back to the discussion with the candidates, we wanted to take a few minutes, take a step back and talk about something that we think is just as important as the candidates themselves, and that is understanding the office they're running for. Organizations and government agencies do a lot of work encouraging people to vote and using events like these to educate community members about the candidates and where they stand on important issues, which is incredibly important. But voting is most powerful when we, the voters, are informed and educated and truly understand who we're voting for and what that lawmaker will actually be able to do once they're elected. So that is what I will briefly highlight. I want to talk specifically about what a member of Congress does, their responsibilities, their influence, and where their jurisdiction kind of begins and ends. We want you to know more about the candidates and their positions, but also have a better understanding of what your congressmember does and actually has the power to deliver on. So I'm going to give you some quick facts and some key areas of responsibility.
To reiterate, if you are exiting the sanctuary, exit quietly. If you are remaining, thank you for your attention. We will start promptly at 7:15. If you are exiting, please exit quietly. If there's anyone you want to speak to, please take it in the hallway. Thank you kindly.
You heard that. Thank you. Thanks, Sherry. All right, so let's give you guys some information about your Congress members. So some quick facts. Congress. The United States Congress has two chambers. The United States House of Representatives, which is a chamber of your Congress members or your candidates, but your congressional member, Dwight Evans, and the United States Senate. So there's two chambers, the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate. These two chambers work together in Washington, D.C. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives across the United States. So when you think about any of these candidates being elected and going to Washington, D.C., they will be one among 435 other members, or there'll be 434 other members, including them. So you have to think about what that means and how, you have 435 members, which are of different parties. So there is a lot of negotiating that has to happen because you have different ideologies and districts that they'll be representing. To give you an idea geographically of the area of a congressional member in Pennsylvania, a congressional district is about 700 to 750 individuals. So the 3rd congressional district, which is where we are today, it has about 700,000 to 710,000 constituents. So the 3rd district, Congressman Evans currently, but one of these candidates will be representing about 700,000 constituents in their districts. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, so you have Congress, about 700,000 constituents. You have the United States Senate, 14 million constituents. So the United States Senate covers the entire state of Pennsylvania. So when you vote for a United States senator, you're voting for, or that individual is representing the entire state of Pennsylvania, which is different from a U.S. House of Representative member because they're representing a district in the city of, or the state of Pennsylvania. Members of Congress serve 2 terms. To be elected, you have to be 25 years old, at least 25 years old, a United States citizen for at least 7 years, and you have to live in the state in which you will be representing. Not the city or the district, but you have to live in the state in which you will be representing. So you have to live in Pennsylvania. House members divide their time between Washington, D.C. and their home district. So Washington, D.C. is where they participate in the legislative process, which is what most of the conversations centered around just a few moments ago. A lot of it talked about what they would do in Washington, D.C. I don't think the panel touched too much on what happens in the district. So it's important to understand when you are voting for your congressional member, you want to make sure they're representing you in Washington, D.C., but you also want to make sure they have a presence for you in your district in Philadelphia. So each calendar year, there's a calendar that comes out. So if you go on congress.gov, you can see the schedule of your congressional member. So when you go on congress.gov and you want to see, what's my Congress member's schedule, right? You can go on congress.gov, you can find the calendar, and on that calendar you'll see in-district periods and you'll see in-session work periods. So when you look on the calendar, you can see when they'll be in session. So that means when they're in D.C. legislating, voting on bills, introducing bills, doing committee work, advocating and negotiating on your behalf in Washington. And then you can also see when they are scheduled to be in their districts. So that means if you're looking to schedule a meeting with your congressional member, if you have an issue that you want to bring up to your congressional member, you can look at that calendar to determine when they'll be in their district to identify opportunities for meetings. And lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the core responsibilities of a congressional member in Washington, D.C., and also in their district. district. So in Washington, D.C., I'll highlight 4 key areas. Introduce and vote on federal legislation. You have to remember it's federal legislation, it's not city or state. So legislation that congressional members introduce and vote on, it's national policy. So if any of these candidates here, or Congressman Evans, introduces a piece of legislation or gets a bill passed, it will impact the entire country, not just Pennsylvania. So when they're thinking about policy to introduce, and you want to get support of the other 434 members, although their work is primarily, they're responsible for, their work should be informed by the district needs, they also have to think about, well, I need to get support from 434 other members, so that might shape what the policy looks like. So they're introducing and voting on federal legislation. They're serving on congressional committees. The committees are where the policy gets, where all the stuff happens. So you introduce a bill, and then it goes to a particular committee, and that's where all the changes and all the stuff really happens. So they are serving on those committees, and it's important to understand that so that you know if there is, something that's important to you, you want to find out if your member is a part of a particular committee and can advocate for you in that way. They provide oversight of the federal government, so Congress monitors how federal agencies implement laws and spends taxpayer dollars. I think you all know that. And they advocate for district priorities. Again, when they're in their district, they're hearing about all of the needs, and when they're in Washington, that is when they are advocating on your behalf to introduce or support or not support legislation. And it's important also, for you to know what they do when they're in the district, because their job is to be in the district representing you. So when members are in the district, they are providing constituent services. So district offices assist residents with issues involving any federal agency. So if you have a problem with a federal agency, you can call your congressperson. That is what they are elected to do. That is what their staff in the district is there to do, represent you and support you if you have an issue with any federal government agency. That's Social Security, that's the VA, that's immigration, that's the passport, which is the U.S. Department of State, that's customs, that's ICE, that's IRS, that's FAA, any federal agency, the U.S. Department of Education. If you have an issue with any federal agency, your congressional member is there to represent you and support you in resolving that issue. And then lastly, engage the community. So representatives meet with residents, local leaders, nonprofit organizations. Their job, small businesses or large businesses, their job is to make sure they understand what is happening in their district, who's in their district, what the needs are, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and again, can advocate for you in Washington, D.C. And also communicating federal updates. So you want to make sure you're staying connected to your congressional member, because that is where you get all the federal information. So when you see the big, beautiful bill, which we all saw, when you see things happening with ICE, when you see voting rights and voting laws being introduced, you have to make sure you stay engaged with your federal representative, which would be your congressional member, because that is the place and the people that are going to represent you and do the work to make sure your interests and your needs are being met. So they are supposed to communicate federal updates and information to the community, and they should have a mechanism to do that so that you all can stay informed. So lastly, I'll just say your U.S. Congress member serves as the link between their community and the federal government. Remember, it's key that it's the link between the community and not the federal government, not the city, not the state, but the federal government in Washington, D.C. So whenever you're thinking about what do I need to call my congressional member for, how do I interact with them, you always want to make sure you understand that their jurisdiction exists on the federal level. If you have questions, ask anybody here. Thank you, guys.
If everyone could begin to take their seats back in the sanctuary.
Let us continue. Thank you for being prompt and returning back to the sanctuary and to your seats, and to our candidates, thank you as well. We do appreciate your respectfulness for that break that we respectfully needed to take. I'm Shari Williams. Welcome back to the Black Women Have Questions Congressional Forum. So far, we have talked leadership. We have talked healthcare. We've also talked about economic justice, wage equity, and entrepreneurship, as well as housing and environmental justice. Let us continue now this conversation with education. Education, youth development, and community safety. Black girls are disproportionately subjected to harsher school discipline and are underrepresented in gifted programs, while also facing higher rates of violence and also trafficking. What would you do to ensure Black girls have equitable access to quality education, mental health resources, and protection from violence? Morgan Cephas.
One of the biggest issues here in our country, and here specifically in Pennsylvania, is the issue of human trafficking. And because of our majority in the House of Representatives, we've been able to move a series of human trafficking bills that protects our girls to the governor's desk. So we have to be just as laser focused on the federal level in passing national policy to address human trafficking, like holding perpetrators accountable and not our young girls accountable that just need access to resources. But also when it comes to education, we have to create non-traditional pipelines for our young people. I know we are a city of eds, meds, and beds, but we know eds and meds, they pay, very low wages, but then also getting into the medical field is extremely expensive. We know student debt is a serious barrier for our girls here. So which is why I've been able to partner Google with the Community College of Philadelphia to create pathways in the AI and IT where people can come out of school without the straddling of student loan debt and get access to careers that are paying $75,000 a year. And that is the type of policy and the type of partnerships I will create as your next Congresswoman.
Morgan Cephas, thank you. Chris Rabb.
Again, so many of my responses focus on systemic issues. it's easy to talk about the symptoms, and that's often what this corporate duopoly produces, because so many of the folks who want to control the members of Congress don't want us to address the business model that is inherently racist and sexist and classist. They don't care about curricula that reflect black girls. They don't. They don't care about the teachers' unions. They don't care about the buildings that our children go to school in. They care about mindless workers to exploit. How we take care of black girls will determine how we take care of this society. We invest in black girls, everyone else benefits. But there's a fear, and this is a fear that's centuries long, that if you empower black youth with knowledge of self, that they may do things that have been done to them for centuries, and that is not our history, people. That is not our history. But we will do for self and do for community and make goodness be the basis of what could be greatness for this nation.
Thank you, Chris Rabb. Ayla Stanford.
I agree with Rep. Rabb, knowing a sense of self. I was fortunate to go to Nathamu Sasa, an African free school, before we couldn't afford the tuition, and then I was at Lingelbach. The mentally gifted class that I was in changed my life and my trajectory. It meant one day a week with my token, I went to a different part of the city. I was exposed to something I never saw in North Philly, I never saw in Germantown, and that's how I was able to change my circumstance and for the lives of so many. So I will support the Title I funding and increase it in education, but also know what's happening in the community so that when I am able to allocate to community groups that are doing the work, so that our young girls have somewhere safe to go after school, so that they can be part of apprentice and be small businesses, and maybe they're not all going to go to medical school, but they have a way to support themselves, support their families, create a legacy, because that is what worked for me through Congressman Shaka Fattah. And the last part, mental health, this 988, I was fortunate with Secretary Becerra right here in West Philly at the consortium to introduce this legislation and bring it through to Philadelphia. This is what's possible at the federal level.
Thank you, Ayla Stanford.
I didn't bring it, it was in the lobby. So thank you, Mount Carmel, for having this information for folks.
It is very vital, our mental health. Sharif Street.
You know, all too often, discrimination begins systemically. When I started school, in elementary school, I was given one of those tests, one of those IQ tests, and they gave me a pencil that wasn't sharpened. And then they wanted to put me in the learning disabled class and label me that way. My mom was an elementary school teacher. She taught in the public school system for 35 years. She knew that I wasn't, and she made them re-administer the test, and this time gave me a pencil that was sharpened. I ended up in an MG class. But those kind of labeling happens to young black children, girls and boys, but especially young girls. And we need to make sure that we root out the kinds of systemic discrimination that happens. That was in the 70s. That stuff is happening again now. That's why we need to make sure that we restore the Department of Education. The Department of Education was founded with a mission to make sure that we stop discrimination in education. We need to restore the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. That's why they have, and make sure it's making sure there's non-discrimination, and not allow this administration to pressure universities like Penn and others to not let black women in. If we do that, we can make a difference.
Thank you, Sharif Street. Dave Oxman.
So let me be honest here for a second. I don't know enough about this particular struggles of black girls in our school district to give you some expert answer, but I know who I would ask. I know who I would ask, and that would be black girls. So let me just say something about like education in general then, okay? You know, we spend so much money on education in this country, but we spend it in the wrong places. We spend it where we don't spend it where the need is greatest. And the disparities in funding are not only unconstitutional, they're immoral. My kids go to Philadelphia Public Schools in South Philadelphia. You know, I live in a relatively affluent neighborhood. We are able as parents to fill in some of the gaps that the Philadelphia School District needs to have filled in. But most schools in this district don't have the ability to do that. And, you know, I want to be in a society where the schools, the communities, the schools in the communities where the need is greatest don't have the least funding, but have the most funding. And we need so much to turn it around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oxman. Morgan Cephas. Thank you, Mr. Oxman, for rounding out that question. We will go. Yes, I'm aware of everyone's titles, representatives, state senator, and doctors, but for this forum, I'm trying to call you only by your names of equity, please. Let's move into food security and public health. Food insecurity excessively impacts Black children in Philadelphia and has measurable impacts on neural development, academic performance, and long-term health outcomes. If elected, what federal policies or funding priorities would you advance to address food insecurity as both a public health and also an educational equity issue? Chris Rabb.
I was put on the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee when I took office 10 years ago. I'm like, why are you doing that? I'm in Philly, and I realized I eat multiple times a day. I'm not bragging, I do. We need food, people. Most of us don't know where it comes from. The Secretary of Agriculture introduced me to my first cow a few years ago, but I haven't had to think about these things. We need to know where our food comes from and know that it's safe and nutritious and that everyone has access to the meals we need. And it shouldn't be intermediated by corporations who seek to prey on consumers who don't have enough money to pay for it in the richest country in world history. So we should have grocery stores that are not owned by magnates and billionaires, but owned by the people, whether they're co-ops or even by the government itself. We have everything we need. We need the political will to do it. No one should be starving in this city. No one.
Thank you, Chris Rabb. Ayla Stanford.
This is a little tough for me. Most of my meals I got at school, so the two go hand in hand. We were the SNAP benefit kid. If you know what it feels like to go into a store and because you don't have your food stamps in the book, someone sends you out because you can't buy it, and or to be arrested as a child because you stole some food. I know what it feels like to be hungry. And so for me, it is all the support that goes into our schools because that is where our students spend the majority of our time. It is a public health crisis, food insecurity. At my health center at 21st and Lehigh, there's this grocery store across the street with brands I'd never heard of, and half the stuff is expired. But that's all we got. Could we get a grocery store? Could we get a bank so people have to stop paying 5% and 8% to cash their check because they can't get a bank account? I'm trying to build longevity in our community so we can empower for us, by us, and I will bring what I've done to Congress, leading by example and my lived experience.
Thank you, Ayla Stanford. Sharif Street.
I live at 16th and Lehigh, and I understand that regular folks on a day-to-day basis, we need to make sure that we have full funding for SNAP, and that it can't be cut off, and it can't just be cut off randomly because at the president's will. But beyond that, we need to make sure that we have access to grow food. I sponsored the Pennsylvania Urban Agriculture Bill and got it into law in the first Pennsylvania Farm Bill. We need to have that as a national imperative. There are folks that are having community gardens all over the place. They are both therapeutic, and also there are people making money at it. It is a business opportunity for people, and it is people know what you eat when you grow your own food, and people need to have access to do that. I will do similar things as a member of Congress. This is not just something I'm talking about. I spent my time on the Agriculture Committee making sure I advanced policy that would actually change people's lives. I've done it as a state senator. I will do it as a member of Congress.
Thank you, sir. Dave Oxman.
Yeah, I think the situation that we have in this city where we have food deserts and so many Philadelphians not able to have access to adequate nutrition, I mean, this is just a symptom of much larger inequalities, whether it's food, or it's education, or it's healthcare. So yes, we need to restore benefits like SNAP benefits. We need to help guide federal dollars to invest in communities. But we also need to, address some of the root causes of the inequalities in this country. That includes a tax code that rewards wealth instead of work, a health insurance system that is beyond broken, and we're not going to lift up everyone in this city simply focusing on some of the symptoms of these inequalities. We need to address root causes.
Thank you, Dave Oxman. Morgan Cephas.
When it comes to the poor outcomes of just so many of our communities across so many zip codes, one of the social determinants of health that we talk about is access to quality food. And we know across our city, we not only have food deserts, but we also have food swamps. And we know a food desert is when you don't have a grocery store, but a food swamp is when you only have access to fast food that is only available to you. So we need to ensure that we are passing federal law that makes significant investments, not in tax credits to big box grocery stores that are still upping their prices and making groceries too high, taking advantage of the federal unauthorized tariffs that Donald Trump has put in place. Not only are they taking advantage of it, but we're seeing it at the cash register. So we have to ensure that on the federal government that we are investing in these type of areas where we're creating subsidized grocery stores that people can go to, that they can actually predict their grocery prices are going to actually be affordable. We also, again, have to increase SNAP benefits. And I know they like to tell you that SNAP benefits are only helping people in Philadelphia, but they're also subsidizing those farmers in those rural areas, in those Republican areas. So this absolutely has to be a priority for us on the federal level.
Thank you, Morgan Cephas. Let's move to voting rights, democracy, and civic engagement. Voting rights advocates say new protections are needed to ensure every eligible voter can easily and safely participate in elections. As we know, this is currently under attack. What would you do to strengthen voter access and election security, and how would you approach existing protections like the Voting Rights Act of 1965? Ayla Stanford.
So currently, we are worried about the SAVE Act. And I have to say, we don't know if that will be in place on May 19th. So we got to work around it. And it's about being innovative and creative and how we're going to do it. So for our family, friends, church members that prefer to vote by mail, we need to make sure they have the information and they have the ID that they need. We need to be asking those questions now. Is it expired? Do you need help? Do you need a voucher? Can I get you there? We need to already think about how we can get people to the polls and have carpools, just like we get them to church on Sunday morning and we fill the sanctuary. So we need to think about, one, of course, we got Congressman Evans and Boyle and Scanlon that are there that are going to try to prevent that from happening, and when it gets to the Senate, but it might happen. So we need to be proactive in thinking about what are we going to do right now so we can take over the House and be ready to move for the next step. So I put that out there for this congregation and across the city. We need to be prepared collectively as a community to get our folks to the polls.
Ayla Stanford, thank you. Sharif Street, what legislative actions will you take to protect voting rights?
We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need to pass it immediately, and we need to make sure that the voting rights are protected. Secondly, should the SAVE Act be passed, let me explain something. That is, the SAVE Act is Donald Trump's blatant attempt to violate the constitutional rights of people across this country. He wants to unconstitutionally pass an act that would give him control of all elections when the U.S. Constitution says they are the province of the states. If such an act is passed, and I believe it won't be passed, but if it is passed, I will take him to court like I did the last time he tried this kind of nonsense. When he tried to tape away our drop boxes, when he tried to stop early voting, when he tried to get our voter information, when he attacked us in 2020, I took him to court not one time, but over a dozen times. I beat him every time. I will beat him as a member of Congress. We will never allow the SAVE Act to be moved forward, and we will never allow our voting rights to be compromised. As a child, my father and uncle got rocks thrown at us for this very issue. I will not sit by and allow that fool to take away our rights to vote.
Sharif Street, thank you. Dave Oxman, what will you do to protect voting rights?
Let's just call this for what it is. I mean, it's the same old Republican playbook, although this time on steroids, right? Because Republicans know that if everybody votes, they lose, right? And if we lose the right to vote, we lose everything. We need to be making voting easier, not harder, right? We need to do things like early voting. We need to automatic registration when you get your driver's license. The bottom line is that we have in this country a system through restrictions on voting and gerrymandering and the ridiculous amount of money that's in politics right now. We have a system where the politicians are choosing their voters instead of the voters choosing their politicians. And this is our greatest threat to democracy as far as I'm concerned.
Dave Oxman, thank you. Morgan Cephas.
When I think about this question, I think about my 5-year-old niece that has less voting rights and less reproductive rights than her grandparents. And when I think about that, I think the only way we're going to be able to protect our democracy is if we win elections. And Pennsylvania in 2024 lost a United States senator, lost 2 congressmen, every single row office, and a state senator for the first time in 20 years. We cannot do that again. And again, the only way that they view themselves as winning is stealing elections, which is why you see that SAVE Act that has its challenges, but is also going to impact 67 million women. 67 million women, and we know when the country catches a cold, black women, we get the flu. So we know it's going to have a detrimental impact to black women. And we also know he's sending ICE and the National Guard into our communities to steal elections, particularly in areas where we turn out the vote. So absolutely, priority number 1 has to be we got to win elections first. So that is first and foremost. And second, we have to ensure that we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act once we take back the majority.
Morgan Cephas, thank you. Chris Rabb.
I agree with everything that's been said. But here's the thing, any Democrat you send to Congress is going to agree with all this stuff. This is baseline stuff, and it's important. But let's be real. We are here because this is the first open seat in 35 years. Whoever represents this seat is representing the bluest district in the country. And whoever wins could be here for a generation. All right? So when you say, oh, well, this is a safe blue seat, it's not for the people. It's only safe for the incumbent. So you have a choice. But here's the thing. In Philadelphia, it's a one-party town. The worst Democrat could beat the best well-funded Republican in the world. So we know the result's going to be a Democrat. What kind of Democrat do we want? But here's the thing. You need a Democrat who's prepared to critique their own party, right? Because the establishment didn't used to be so diverse. So we need to make sure that we make the Democratic Party do the one thing it's supposed to do, is to turn out the vote. And only 1 out of 5 folks come out to vote when it matters most. So you can talk all you want about Donald Trump, but how are we handling our own party in our own city for our own people?
Let's stay there then on a rebuttal, 30 seconds. What will you do, Chris Rabb, to get more people to get out to vote? How does the Democratic Party do that?
I can't speak for the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party's never endorsed me, and it's a badge of honor right now. Never. It didn't matter that I was a committee person for 18 years. It didn't matter that I was a ward leader. It didn't matter that I was on the Democratic State Committee. It didn't matter that I had more votes than any state rep in Pennsylvania history in a majority black district. I never got their endorsement in a contested race. And the reason was I had an independent thought and committed to the people and not to the party. I'm not running to represent the party. I'm here to represent the people. And so I reach out to young people. I hire formerly incarcerated folks at a living wage. I hire young people at 14 who are as young as 14 and paying them $21 an hour. You reach people where they are.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to give each of you a rebuttal on that, 30 seconds. Ayla Stanford, what needs to be done to decrease the apathy in the Democratic Party, specifically here in this congressional district?
Specifically, I answered 3 options the first time, but I could reiterate that we need to make sure we get anyone who needs assistance, and early voting matters. The other thing is I've been knocking on doors. I teach at the University of Pennsylvania. My son turned 18 last month. So these are all groups of people. Our seniors, especially black women, they vote and they talk to me about their Social Security, about their health care, about their medications, and how I will protect that. And so again, as I said, it's trust, giving people something to believe in, and someone who has fought for you before and has demonstrated leadership when you need it most. And I've had the opportunity to earn your trust, and when you give me that opportunity again, I will represent you as your Congresswoman.
Thank you, Ayla Stanford. Morgan Cephas, 30 seconds. What can you do in this district to beat back the apathy when it comes to voting?
Again, in 2016, I had to take on the Democratic Party myself because I did not believe what they were doing. They were actually being status quo. And again, that is a reflection of what happens when the Democratic Party, and we don't stand up to our own party, we lose elections. And in 2024, we again lost a senator, 2 Congress members, the entire row offices, and we actually have the chair that was there in 2024 sitting on this stage while also leaving $62,000 in the bank account, leaving my uterus at risk when it came to the Supreme Court for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So again, we not only have to stand up to Republicans, we got to stand up to Democrats when they are not getting the job done, and we did not do that in 2024, and we have to think differently here in 2026.
Thank you, Morgan Cephas. Dave Oxman, 30 seconds. What can you do in this district to get more people to care about voting?
So 2024 here was a calamity. It wasn't just that we lost, but it's how we lost. We had core constituents like young people move away from us in droves or just not even bother to come and show up. Why? Well, I mean, the answer is simple, because they were not inspired by our message. Too many people see the Democratic Party, and this is not just this part of Philadelphia, I'm telling you it's everywhere. Too many people see the Democratic Party as a party that just wants to nibble around the edges of some big systemic problems, and when they have a choice between, you know, a bunch of nibblers and an arsonist that promises to burn it all down, we see how many people, sadly, will choose the latter. So you want to turn people out? Well, lead with some messages that are inspiring.
Thank you, Dave Oxman. Sharif Street, what is it about your candidacy that separates you for why people should be excited to vote for you and not have so much apathy in this race?
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny, a lot of my legislative colleagues and other people up here have talked about what it takes to turn around the party and what they're going to do if you give them another office. When I got elected in 2016, the year all of us got elected, the Democratic Party was at an all-time low. We only had 16 out of 50 state senators. I didn't just talk about it. I got involved. I went and took over the vice chair of the party, and then we are now only 2 seats away from flipping the state senate. And by the way, we net gained a state senate seat, one of of the only top place in the country we added it. The House majority that the representative talks about, I gave her House majority as chair for the first time in over 2 decades. We flipped the House, and I made sure we had a black woman as Speaker of the House, because there would be no black woman Speaker if we hadn't flipped it. We flipped congressional seats. We have a Democratic governor for the 3rd time, and we're about to elect the 4th time. We didn't lose one statewide judicial race, and that is why we have the right to vote. And yes, I took on the National Party, and I took them on at a time. That's why Ken Martin and those folks came out against me when I went to run for Congress, because I understood we needed to do better, and in Pennsylvania we have.
Thank you, Sharif Street. A requested rebuttal from Morgan Cephas, 30
so let's
seconds.
be clear, a black woman in Joanna McClinton claimed the House of Representatives, who now has the gavel. And again, we lost everything in 2024. The only thing survived was a black woman under the leadership of Joanna McClinton.
Thank you, Morgan Cephas. Thank you all for your spirited questions, spirited responses on that question. We are here to figure out how do the candidates separate themselves. As we know, again, it's a very Democratic party. As I said from the outset, we are trying to then see what are the separators among our candidates who are running. Let's move to our next topic, immigration, civil rights, and community protection. Many constituents have concerns about ICE and how ICE has carried out its enforcement tactics and the rights of immigrant communities. What policies or oversight actions would you support if elected to this office to ensure civil rights and due process protections? Sharif Street.
We need to abolish ICE. ICE is an organization where Donald Trump has recruited white supremacists into it. He recruited Proud Boys into it. It is corrupt to its core. We need to get rid of ICE. And our immigration system was created in the origins through the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was at its inception, a lot of our current system was created based on a racist set of policies that have been augmented in the enforcement by this president, and so we need to abolish it. There are better ways to enforce immigration that are not, where the organization is not populated by white supremacists from Proud Boys.
Thank you, sir. Dave Oxman.
I agree with that sentiment. Sometimes I think, like, if you need to go to work wearing a mask to cover your identity, you better ask some questions about your job description. This is not about immigration, right? This is about us getting used to people coming into our homes without a judicial warrant. It's about us getting used to the idea of people walking around city streets armed to the teeth with their faces covered and taking away people's rights to due process. ICE, I agree with Senator Street, ICE is beyond redemption at this point. And that's why Democrats need to stand up and realize that if this is not an issue worth going to the mat on, I really don't know what is. And once we do that, later, when we're in power again, we're going to try to tackle an immigration system that is not working for anybody. It's not working for Americans who are here, and it's not working for immigrants who want to come here.
Thank you, Dave Oxman. Morgan Cephas.
Oversight means absolutely nothing right now to what is happening down in Washington, D.C. So we cannot provide any additional oversight over ICE. We absolutely have to abolish that institution immediately once we take back the majority. But we got to go a step further, because not only are they snatching people off the streets, snatching 5-year-olds, but they are killing people in broad daylight. And they're actually not killing people that look a lot like you and I. They're killing people, white women, white men. And when they start killing people, Houston, we have a serious problem. So not only do we have to abolish them, and it's not enough to just fire Kristi Noem, we actually have to hold her accountable for the crimes that she was allowed to commit while in office, and that includes Donald Trump. But we also have to go a step further. We have to prosecute ICE agents that were allowed to just come into our neighborhoods and just terrorize us, because as a black community, we know what it's like to be over-policed. And lastly, we must get rid of every single detention center across this country, because they're not just killing people through ICE, they're also killing people behind the cloak of darkness in those detention centers. And we are scheduled to actually get 3 more in this region. We already have one of the largest detention centers in this region, where Congress members aren't even allowed to go in there. So the oversight is out of the window, and we have to shut them down.
Morgan Cephas, thank you. Chris Rabb, I know you have something to add.
Who, me?
Yes.
No. All right, why not? Look, folks, I am glad that people are catching up, but I've been talking about this since 2017. My grandfather used to say, don't tell me what you're gonna do, show me what you did. So in 2017, I introduced an anti-ICE bill. I got very few Democrats coming on my bill. A lot of people say, well, what's that got to do with me? I'm not an immigrant. My people aren't immigrants. I descend from enslaved black folk. If they're shooting a white woman in the face and live streaming it, they coming after you. But I didn't need to do it because it was happening to me or my family or my neighborhood. I did it because it's a justice issue. How we show up for others matters most in the most adverse situations. And now we're seeing they're coming after us, right? And so when I stood up, not just to introduce a substantive bill that virtually no Democrats supported when I did it, and it wasn't popular in 2017, I was asked by a family that was seeking refuge from Mexico to escort their child to public school because there was no other elected official that they trusted in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm proud of that. I'm still in touch with that family, and I'm for all families because no family should be destroyed. And we must dismantle all of the detention centers because it comes from a place of bipartisan complicity. You can go back to the Chinese Exclusion Act all you want, but the reality is it was under Bill Clinton that allowed this to happen 25 years ago. We got to hold our own party to account.
Thank you, Chris Rabb. Yeah. Rounding out this question, Ayla Stanford.
Yes. So regarding immigration, we can protect our borders without killing people. We need to charge the ICE agents for the laws that they broke. I have to commend New York City because those police officers are arresting ICE agents on the street. I drove my son to school. We saw all these cops going down the street. This was just last week. And there was a carload, a man driving, and women in the car that I know were domestic workers. And I watched my son, Mom, what are they doing? Pull out his phone to video this as this was happening. So this is not over there in Minnesota. This is happening right here. So it means we're calling our senators, even the ones in Pennsylvania that don't agree to support the governor and support at the federal level, to say, do not support these detention centers that people are trying to buy up in our Commonwealth. And we also need to make sure we charge Kristi Noem. You know she's still on payroll. She might have got demoted, but she's still on payroll, and she broke laws, and those are things that we can introduce.
Thank you, Ayla Stanford. This congressional district, as we know, is extremely diverse. Some of the poorest neighborhoods and some of the most affluent are represented in the 3rd Congressional District. If Black women voters in Philadelphia's 3rd Congressional District are the ones who ultimately will send you to Washington, D.C., because it is Black women who are the most consistent and largest voting bloc of this district, please share one policy priority and one personal value that will guide how you represent Black women and their families in this district. One policy priority, one personal value that will determine how you fight in Congress for the next few years for the voices who have called for this congressional forum tonight. Ayla Stanford.
I unapologetically love Black people, period. You never have to question my loyalty or my drive for the people of this city. Because of that love, I stepped up during COVID. And when the city gave the contract to a group of ill-equipped young white boys, and we needed someone to manage and do the mass vaccination, because I started with people, with us, who needed help the most, that allowed me to take care of everyone. And that's how everything needs to be. When you start with those who have barriers and need a safety net and have the most challenges, you take care of the least, the lost, it takes care of everyone. When you start up top with the 2%, it takes care of no one but the 2%. So that is my personal value. It's my priority. It's what I've done. And I want to reduce the rates of heart disease. Black women spend so much time taking care of everyone else, and we're dying in 30s and 40s from heart attacks and stroke. I want to reduce the rates of cancer. That's why at my health center at 21st and Lehigh, we are building an imaging center. Now you'll be able to get your mammogram right in your community. And we have invested in that to reduce the casualties and the mental stress, and so that we can continue to take care of those who we love and who love us. That is my personal story. That's my policy and priority.
Thank you. Ayla Stanford. Chris Rabb, 1 minute.
I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. I hire black women and listen to them. I would not be here if it wasn't for black women, literally, but also because the people who have inspired me to serve have all been black women in my family. So that's what drives me. It's the folks who don't see themselves in power, who say, I have power regardless, and I'm going to find my strength and influence other people. And if we are wise public servants and not politicians, we humble ourselves to listen to people closest to the pain, and no one understands that pain better than black women. No one. So on the policy front, I'm introducing a bill. I've already circulated it, and it's moving in other states. It's the Equal Opportunity Audit Program. It makes sure that there's a level playing field in terms of employment and contracting, so that all of this nonsense, whitewashed DEI that's hiring these aggressively incompetent white men on the state level and on the federal level, that we have a level playing field, so the type of barriers that black women and other folks experience is dissolved. And I'm very much looking forward to doing that on the federal level.
Thank you, Chris Rabb. Morgan Cephas, one policy priority, one personal value to guide you representing black women.
So I've been a black woman all my life. And every step of the way in my career, I've been told to wait my turn. While black women have been told to wait their turn by not just Republicans, but also a Democratic Party that we consistently show up for. But it also makes me think of a conversation that I had with U.S. Senator Bob Casey at a roundtable about black women putting Democrats in office, but not seeing our policies reflected in their progress. And as a direct result, I took that conversation specifically about black maternal health and turned it around in this Commonwealth to see to the point where we're seeing a decrease here in the city of Philadelphia. And that is how I value black women's voice, because it's not just about us. It's about the communities that we serve. It's about our families. We are the economic breadwinners, a majority of our community, which is why a top priority for me is how black women are doing economically right now, so they can be their own masters of their own fate. When I think of Ayanna Pressley holding a roundtable about the 300,000 black women that were pushed out of this economy, what are the policies and the solutions that's going to tackle that? It's student loan debt, it's debt in general, it's access to capital for our entrepreneurs, access to mortgages to where we're not redlined. Economics has to be our priority if we want to ensure that we move along the economic spectrum, and that will be my priority as your first black congresswoman in the 3rd Congressional District.
Morgan Cephas, thank you. Dave Oxman.
So one policy and one value. You know, for the last 25 years, I've had this incredible privilege of working as an ICU doctor, and I meet people literally on some of the worst days of their lives. Days when they're scared, they don't know what's coming next. And it has been an incredible privilege to do that, but it also shows you so many of the challenges that too many Philadelphians face. And in the hospital, while health is all about just not being sick, in the world outside the hospital, Health is about whether you have a job that pays a living wage, whether your kids have a school that is properly funded, whether you're able to afford your medications or not because maybe you've been kicked off your health insurance. So the way I look at things is a congressperson should be every day doing the things that need to be done to fight for the health of the people of their congressional district. And you want to talk about a value, it's about the way I see politics. You know, politics is not just about votes and about economic plans, and politics are about our values. It's about the way we live out our commitments to each other. So every budget is a moral statement, right? When someone cannot afford, when a diabetic cannot afford their insulin, that's not a policy failure, that is a moral failure. And that is the way I see politics, because I know what is at stake.
Dave Oxman, thank you. Sharif Street.
On my desk sits a picture of my oldest daughter, Arian. It's her from her prom. Her date in the picture wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to be a lawyer. They thought they were going to be the Cosbys. Yeah. He went off to Del State, came home, and was murdered. That picture still sits on my desk because it's her prom picture. I had to hold and console a black woman that's my daughter, who will always have to live with the memories of her prom picture. Her date was killed. I had to hold my wife, April, when we lost Lala in a mass shooting on 60th Street. I've had to console countless black women in my neighborhood at 16th and Lehigh. I've to sit with the mothers in charge, because when black people are murdered, black women are picking up the pieces, and they're coming to figure out how to bury our children, not just old people, but young people. It is a tragedy that affects us at its core. And when I go to Congress, I'll never forget the faces of those black mothers, because I live in a neighborhood at 16th and Lehigh where I go home every night and have to look them in the face. And I will make sure that they are remembered as I'm fighting to stop gun violence across this country.
Thank you, Sharif Street. A quick yes or no on this, please. Sharif Street, do you support measures such as universal background checks when it comes to the federal assault weapons ban?
Yes.
Dave Oxman.
Absolutely.
Morgan Cephas.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Ayla Stanford.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that is in regards to background checks when we are talking about gun violence in this city and, of course, in this country, where you would have the opportunity to vote for that on a national level. Also, quick yes or no, please, in regards to receiving PAC money. Sharif Street, do you receive money from PACs?
Yes.
Dave Oxman.
No.
Morgan Cephas.
No.
Chris Rabb.
No.
Ayla Stanford.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. PAC money, as you guys know, are different organizations that help fund candidates. You're welcome, of course, to look up. That's listed who funds the races for those who said they do accept PAC money. We are now going to give each candidate 30 seconds to make a closing statement, and then we will conclude our congressional interview. Ayla Stanford.
I'm sorry. We can feed someone for a day. A meal, a coat, salt on an icy street. That matters, and I've done that. But what I'm fighting for is how you get your own fish, your own salt. How do you provide for yours? That's economic stability. That's a living wage, real jobs, safe streets. That's not charity, that's dignity. No excuses, no waiting. That's leadership, and that's why I'm here, to be your next Congresswoman.
Sharif Street.
We are in a moment where Donald Trump is attacking our basic rights. As a child, my father and my uncle rode through to stand up to Frank Rizzo. When we went through South Philadelphia, they threw rocks at us. And I said to my uncle, Uncle Milt, they're throwing rocks at us. What should we do? He said, duck, pick them up, and throw them back. I will always hear the voice of my uncle, the great Milton Street. And in this moment where we have a president who is acting like Frank Rizzo did back then, I will stand up to him as I have as a state senator, as a party chair. I will take him to court. I will fight for our community. I will not compromise with him. I will make sure that our rights are protected. I'm ready for this moment. Mike Tyson said it once before, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I'm ready for this fight, and I will take on Donald Trump.
Chris Rabb.
We're not going to beat Donald Trump in the courts. We're going to beat him in the street. All right? So I'm not a fancy lawyer. I'm not even an unfancy lawyer. All I know is the people have the power. When we show up, when black folks show up, when Philly show up, the whole nation wins because they try to take it from us in 2020. We shut it down. But we got to show up, and we have to show up and hold our own party to account. We can talk about Rizzo, but if you're not talking about Bob Brady, you're part of the problem. I trust the people. I trust the people. So we need to show up, and we got to give them a reason to show up. And we haven't done that. We're going to do it now on May 19th.
Dave Oxman.
So I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about where we are right now. You know, the fight against Donald Trump and Trumpism is not going to end when Donald Trump leaves office, right? This fight is going to continue. And my worry is that the Democratic Party we have right now is not built to inspire enough people to continue this fight. And we're going to be looking down the barrel at 8 years of J.D. Vance, God forbid. God forbid, right? So what we need to do while we are fighting Donald Trump, and we need to do that in the streets and in the courts, is we need to be thinking about what kind of Democratic Party we are going to build for the future, because the fight will continue.
Thank you. Morgan Cephas, please close us out.
So I'm not going to talk to you about yesteryears. I'm going to talk to you about this year, because this election will determine not just 2026, it will determine 2036. And we need somebody going down there that's not going to be satisfied with just playing defense against Donald Trump, but get on offense and actually beat Republicans, like I've worked to beat Republicans in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to give us the majority that we haven't had in 10 to 15 years, and we took it back in 5. That is the type of leadership that we need down in Washington, D.C. And we need to ensure that we're holding Democrats accountable to deliver for communities like ours. That is this moment right now. And as the first black woman represented in Congress, black women that showed up here tonight, I want to thank you. I know you are going to show up yet again for this Democratic Party and for this democracy, but you got to send somebody down there that is going to fight and win, but also deliver. And that is what I've been doing for West Philadelphia for the past 10 years of my career. Thank you so much.
A round of applause for our candidates, Sharif Street, Dave Oxman, Morgan Cephas, Chris Rabb, Ayla Stanford. It's been my pleasure to moderate this forum. Black women have questions, Congressional Forum. I'm Shari Williams. I'll see you on 6 ABC. I'm going to turn it over now to the Moores.
Again, thank you to the candidates, and thank you to Shari for moderating such a wonderful event. And thank you to each and every one of you who came out on this evening to be informed, to not only for this event, but as you move forward to make a critical decision in the upcoming weeks. It is not a game. It's not about who you like. It's about who will be the best candidate in the upcoming weeks, but more importantly, in the upcoming years. There is a lot at stake. And my hope and my prayer and my concern is that you all make a valid effort to be informed, get out, make your votes count, and get out to make your future count. As I look around and see little ones in the audience, in the congregation, you're not just voting for now, you're voting for years down the road. So make sure, I'm serious. So thank you to Case Ministry, the other partners who came out, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank my lovely wife for her role in participating and making sure y'all came out. And I'll leave it to you to give the final words, or, well, God bless you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Good night. God bless you.